Hey everyone, Scott Sambucci here, and today's big topic that I want to go through with you today is pipeline analysis and management. So one of the biggest aspects of managing yourself from a sales perspective and then eventually managing a team is making sure that the deals that we have in our sales pipeline are real deals and knowing what we need to do to get them from early stage to late stage and get them from late stage to become customers. And so what I want to do today is talk through some techniques and strategies to make sure that even if you are a single person team, that you're able to do an effective pipeline analysis and management for yourself. Because if you've got nobody else looking over your shoulder, then you alone are the one that's responsible for making sure that you are analyzing your pipeline the right way. Okay, so let's do it. So the first thing we want to do, of course, is talk about why this topic is so important. Well, first of all, it can be super duper frustrating when you're getting a lot of continuations but not advances. So what we mean by a continuation is a situation where you've got a sales prospect, you've got somebody who's interested supposedly in buying your product, and you've had a couple conversations, and each time you call them, they say, "Hey, Scott, thanks so much for calling. Listen, got no new information for you today, but gosh, could you give me a call back in 2 weeks?" Or, you call them back in 2 weeks and they go, "Man, Scott, I'm really glad that you called. I'd really love to set up a product demo with you and the rest of the team. It's just, gosh, everybody's traveling right now. So what I need you to do is call me back in a couple more weeks and then we'll circle up the troops and we'll have you come in and do that." So those are continuations. The conversation is continuing. However, you're not advancing the sale from one stage or one step to the next step. And so what we want to do as part of this pipeline analysis and management is identify places where we're having a lot of continuation so that we can work through those and in fact get advances and move away from that frustrating part of the sales cycle. So the other reason this is really that pipeline management and analysis can be really frustrating is that it's hard to know what's real. So you get a couple conversations going and you feel like, man, I feel like these guys could be really good customers for me. But sometimes our intuitions and our instincts are completely wrong. The people who we felt like were going to be the perfect customers for us eventually can go dark on us. And then those customers who we thought we'd never hear from again, all of a sudden might give us a call and go, "Man, we've been talking about your product and we'd really love for you to come in and do another demo for us." So, sometimes it's really hard to know what's real if we're so close to an individual situation that we're not doing the proper analysis the right way. And that gets a little frustrating because you're sitting there and you're the one that is responsible for knowing and hopefully predicting what's going to close and what's not going to close. And if you're not even sure what's real, you're kind of sitting there like, "Man, I don't even know what's going on in my own sales pipeline." The other reason this is really, really a challenging or a frustrating topic for people is that sometimes it's just hard to focus, right? We're running our own company, we're an entrepreneur, we're a startup CEO. So on top of all the work that we're supposed to be doing from a sales standpoint, we're also supposed to be doing marketing and building case studies. We're supposed to be going out on LinkedIn and doing our prospecting. We're supposed to be running the company. We might be trying to raise capital. We might be trying to do the hiring. We might be responsible for product. We might be responsible for engineering. So at the end of the day, it can just be really, really hard to focus in on sales and most importantly, focus on those sales opportunities which are the most likely to close. If we only have a fixed amount of time in our day, in our week, we want to make sure that we're spending that time with the right opportunities. And so if we're not quite sure what those opportunities are and we're not able to focus on those opportunities, it gets to be pretty frustrating, right? It also turns out that we can get distracted. We can get distracted with all of these other things that are going on with our company. The product needs to be fixed, or the engineering team isn't going through as quickly as you thought on the last sprint, or all the work that you thought you were going to be doing around prospecting never materialized because you ended up taking a couple of meetings with potential investors or potential advisors, right? So we end up getting distracted. And worst of all, sometimes we actually forget that we're supposed to be doing sales, or we forget that we were supposed to follow up and do something that we said we were going to do with somebody who was pretty darn interested in our product. Believe me, I've done this myself plenty of times where you have a wonderful, great, positive sales conversation. And because the moment you finish that one conversation, you had another meeting starting up and then another call after that. And then you had to go close out your day because you had to go pick up the kids from school. And then all of a sudden the next day rolls around and you've totally forgotten that you were going to send that really great sales lead a follow-up email or schedule a time or get with their IT director to talk about data exchanges. And it's not that you obviously you didn't mean to do that. You just forget because you're busy, because you are distracted, because it's hard to focus, because you're doing a lot of things. And ultimately, a lot of times, what ends up happening is that we can hit a dead end. We hit a dead end because we're not quite sure what else to do with the sales opportunities we have in our pipeline. Once you've had a couple of deals in your pipeline for a little while, they feel like they get stale. You feel like you've done everything you're supposed to be doing in order to kind of resurrect their interest, but nothing's happening. And so if we're doing good pipeline analysis, if we're managing our pipeline the right way, what this should hopefully do is yield for us some opportunities to go and do different activities, do some things that we hadn't thought about doing. So, I mean, ultimately, the biggest fear, of course, is that we're just, I mean, for me, my biggest fear was always, always, always like, man, I've got this pipeline of 10 deals, 20 deals, 30 deals in some way, shape, or form, or in some part of the sales process. Like, what happens if they all go dark at one time? What if I can't get any of them to close? That was always and is always my biggest fear, right? But it makes you feel like you wasted a ton of time, and you go from optimism to desperation. You're just like, man, I thought I had all these great leads, these prospects, these people interested in my product. And so you felt really good over the last couple of months as you were doing all of that work to build up that pipeline, and then nothing's closing, and you start to feel a little bit desperate. So the opportunity here is, if we're doing our sales pipeline analysis and our management the right way, what that's going to do for us is identify gaps and risks in our individual sales opportunities, right? It's going to allow us to find trouble spots. Where are the places that we haven't figured out exactly all of the information that we need to get from our customer? And in order to propel that sales opportunity from early to late stage, or from late stage to close. If we're doing our pipeline management the right way, we should know exactly where we stand with each and every sales opportunity. And more so, once we start hiring a team and managing a team around us, we should know where they stand, because we've got this objective viewpoint on how to properly assess and analyze our portfolios. And it feels like ultimately what you want to do here is crack the selling code, right? It's one thing to get prospects interested. It's another step to get them into a product demo. It's a third to kind of get those next steps going after the demo. But ultimately what we're going to do is get those out of the pipeline and into the customer bucket. That's what we're trying to do here. It's like pulling the sword from the stone. So what I want to do is help you figure out how you can build your sales machine. And a key part of that, of course, is doing the right pipeline analysis and management. So one of the easiest ways for me to talk about the importance of doing this is just a quick example that I can share with, and of course, like a lot of my examples, they've come from bad experience. So back when I was with Altos Research, I was selling real estate data, mortgage data, to a trading desk at a company called PIMCO. If you're all familiar with the financial markets, you know PIMCO is a huge financial services trading company. They do everything from equities to stocks to bonds. They do pretty much everything. And I've been working through a sales pipeline, a sales opportunity with PIMCO over the course of a couple of months. We had launched a new product. One of their analysts had gotten wind of what we had done through the newsletter that we did, and kind of one thing led to another. We're doing all the things we thought we were supposed to be doing in order to move this from, hey, this looks pretty interesting, to, wow, we're pretty interested in buying and hopefully getting them as customers. And we reached what I thought was kind of the pinnacle of the sales process. We had done the demos, we had done the meetings, we had talked with a bunch of people on the desk, senior analysts, managing directors, all the people who we thought were ultimately responsible, and we thought we were really clear on the problem it is that we were going to be solving for them with our data. And we finally got to this pinnacle conversation. I remember calling up the managing director and saying, like, hey, what do you think? What are we going to do? And he said, you know what? We're not interested. I'm really busy right now. I got to go. Click. That was it. That was the conversation. And it was almost as if, like, not almost as if he hung up on me after spending months with him and his team. And I was just flabbergasted. I just remember sitting there going, like, did that just happen? Did I just spend hours upon hours upon hours with not just me, but other people on my team working to get all the information, doing all the demos, talking to all the people, and like getting to this point where I thought we were going to get this nice big 50, 60, $70,000 sale only to get hung up on by this guy. And of course I was upset, and of course I was pissed off. And after things had kind of simmered down in my own mind, I went back and thought about it, and I looked at all of the things we had done, and it turns out that there were a couple of key parts of that sale that I missed. That if I had done my pipeline analysis the right way, then I would have identified the most critical aspect that I was missing, which was I wasn't clear from PIMCO's perspective exactly why they were buying our data, what problem it was that we were solving. So I had all the right buyers. I could show them like, hey, here's some ways that other customers have earned an ROI on our data. They spend 50,000 and they're able to trade and do all these different things with new portfolios and new trades and trade faster and trade at a better margin. But at the end of the day, I never got down to the core problem that they ultimately had versus not using our data. And had I had this pipeline management strategy in place, then I'm sure I would have been able to avoid that phone call with Marco later on down the sales pipeline. I could have addressed it much earlier. I could have been more honest about where I really was with the sale versus where I felt like I was. And that's one of the reasons I want to share some of these strategies and then ultimately the tactics with you, because I definitely never want you to have that feeling that I had after months and months and months with a really big name brand. So let's dive into a couple key principles here as to what we want to be focused on when we're doing our pipeline analysis and our pipeline management. So first and foremost, it's super important to be regular. And what I mean by this is doing a pipeline review, if you can, every single week or at least every 2 weeks. Now, if you're not working with other people, if you're a single person team, or maybe you've got a disaggregated team, you've got people working in different locations, you might be working from home, you might be working in a shared workspace. You don't necessarily have another person that can sit there and help you with your pipeline reviews. And so the first thing I would do is definitely encourage you to, one, book a calendar time for yourself, preferably for me, because I get super busy as the day goes on. I like to do it early in the morning. And I also like to do pipeline reviews. Specifically, I like to do them on Thursday mornings. And here's the reason I like to do them on Thursday mornings. Because one, I do them in the morning before I open up email and all this other crazy stuff starts happening. Secondly, because as we get into the next couple of principles about doing pipeline reviews, is by doing them on Thursday morning, what that does is gives me 2 full days to take action on anything I need to be doing with any of my sales opportunities. I know a lot of people like to do pipeline reviews, say on Friday afternoon, because it's like, hey, where do we end up at the end of the week? The problem with that is that if you're doing those pipeline reviews on Friday afternoon and you discover that there are, say, 3 sales opportunities where you have to take a very specific action in the next day or less, Friday afternoon is a pretty tough day to motivate that. So if you do it on Thursday morning, it gives you 2 days to take your actions, to do whatever work you need to do to pull that sales opportunity back into shape. Whether that means setting up a meeting, calling somebody that is on the buying committee, pulling together some research that needs to get pulled together, whatever that is. So that's why I like to do them on Thursday morning. So that would be the very first thing, is making sure you're doing these regularly. And the second thing I would encourage you to do is that if you are working on your own, if you don't have a team around you, then definitely buddy up with somebody. So whether you want to buddy up with somebody that's working together with me in this startup selling program, you can team up together with, even if you're in totally different industries selling totally different products, the principles still apply. And it's just having somebody that can grill you a little bit about some of the gaps and risks that exist within each individual sales opportunity. And later on, I'll talk about a worksheet that'll be available to you that you can download and use both either by yourself or with another person. So whether that's somebody in the startup selling program or it's just somebody that you work with at a shared workspace, I'm sure there's people that you're friendly with. You can say, hey, I'll buy coffee for you if you just come and sit with me for 30 minutes and ask me questions about my own sales opportunities. You're just looking for different perspectives and another voice. And so you want to do this regularly. Make it a Thursday morning meeting or Thursday morning coffee with an accountability buddy if you need to, and just focus on making sure you're doing this on a regular basis so that when you need to make changes or you need to make adjustments to the activities around your sales pipeline, opportunities, then you have an opportunity to do that really quickly. You don't want something to kind of fester on too long. If you go 2, 3, 4 weeks between sales pipeline analysis and you realize like, man, I'm really lacking in one particular area. Well, if that's something you should have fixed 2 weeks ago, you might have lost the momentum that you might have built with a specific opportunity. So first and foremost, be regular in terms of doing this. Secondly, you want to be honest with yourself, right? And this is where the Q framework that I've talked about so much can become really, really handy, right? So what this does is, by being honest, what we're doing here is being honest about assessing each opportunity. And the reason the Q framework is handy is because you can go step by step through the 6 main questions in that framework. Like, what problem am I solving? Who am I solving it for? Why is this company interested in buying my product? What's the ROI? How are they going to buy for me? What's the plan of action? When is the next step? Do I know what the next step, the next metric is to evaluate success in the sales opportunity? And then finally, where am I in the sales process with these guys? Is it early stage, middle stage, late stage, contract, right? And so going through those 6 questions will allow you to be honest, because if you can't honestly and completely answer all 6 of those questions, if you can't be clear as to what problem you are solving for your customer, that's a huge gap that needs to be filled with your sales opportunity. You won't be able to close your sales opportunity until you know exactly what problem it is you're solving. Case in point, my very unfortunate situation with PIMCO that I just described to you, right? Who are your buyers? Do you know who your user buyer is, your technical buyer, your economic buyer? Who is your product champion? Are you really clear about all 4 of those buyers, as we've talked about many, many times? You have to know who all your buyers are, and you have to have sold to all of those buyers individually based on their individual perception of value. That brings us to the why, right? Why are they buying from you? Is the technical buyer interested in buying from you because you're going to decrease risk, and the economic buyer is interested in buying from you because you're going to help increase revenue? And the user buyer is going to buy from you because it's going to help increase efficiency. Are you really, really clear on each of those? And then, of course, the how. Are you talking about proof of concepts or pilot programs? Are you talking about phased rollouts? Are you and the customer super clear that if they were to buy from you, what would happen the moment they say go? And then, of course, the when and the where, knowing where you stand in the sales process. So being honest with yourself and using this Q framework, these 6 questions, are a way to help you objectively assess where you are. And again, the worksheet that is available to you for your pipeline analysis will be something that will be a way for you to help stay honest with yourself, even if you have to do this by yourself. Now, if you're partnering up with somebody, you have an accountability buddy or a pipeline buddy, then you can just explain to your pipeline buddy, like, hey, these are the 6 questions that I need to be able to answer, and I want you to ask me, and when I answer them, does it make sense to you? Or does something seem unclear or incomplete? Because if the answer is, yeah, something's unclear or incomplete, then chances are pretty high that you're not going to get that deal through the pipeline. So the third principle that we want to talk about here is to be quick to act. So like I was talking about earlier, the reason that you want to, the reason I like to, and the reason you might consider strongly setting up your pipeline reviews for Thursday morning, is that you want to, as soon as you identify your gaps and your risks, be quick to act. Right? So if you see there's a gap or a risk in your sales opportunity, then you want to be able to very quickly do something about it. So coming out of your pipeline analysis meeting with yourself or with your pipeline buddy, what you should really have is a task list for yourself and say, man, okay, I've got 20 deals in the pipeline. Of the 20, these 4 are my best opportunities to close in the next 4 or 5 weeks. And of those sales opportunities, it looks like each one of them has a specific open loop or a risk or a gap or some place where I don't have complete information. And so that should be your action item for those sales opportunity and for that sales opportunity. And you should very quickly act on that right away. That's why we're doing these on Thursday morning. So you have an opportunity to get on the phone, make a phone call, set up a meeting, set up a demo, set up a webinar, do whatever it is you need to do in order to move that deal forward from its existing state. So I had a really good example of this when I was on a coaching call with a company they do called Meteor. Meteor does meeting planning software. So if you've ever been in a meeting, you know how inefficient these meetings can run. And so I was doing kind of on one of our weekly sales acceleration calls, and the CEO was asking me like, "Hey, I went through the whole process with them. They told me everything was good to go. They're all ready to get up and running. And then I sent an invoice, and the answer I got back was like, hey, thanks so much for sending this invoice. So the next thing I need to do is talk to my supervisor and just get his approval, and then we're good to go." And she's like, well, wait a minute here. I thought you said we were good to go. That's why I sent the invoice in the first place. Well, it turns out the person who was thought to be the decision maker really wasn't the decision maker, even though she had gone through the whole sales process and had asked specifically like, hey, are there any other questions or any other approvals? Nope, everything looks good, send me the invoice. And so the reason I use this as an example to be quick to act is that this is a perfect example where the CEO is saying, well, what should I do? And I said, well, the answer is right now, pick up the phone and go talk to that person and say, could you just help me understand exactly what you mean by you need to get your supervisor's approval? Does this mean that your supervisor simply has to rubber stamp it and the decision actually is yours? It's just that coming out of their supervisor's budget? Or does it mean that we have some selling to do? Like, does the supervisor still want to hear about how this whole thing is going to work and how we're going to be rolling out the product and service that we're going to be rolling out? Because if there's still selling to do, well, let's get a meeting going. Let's do another demo. Let's have that conversation where I'm there to answer any and all questions that your supervisor may have. So that's just a really, really simple example where, even though you've done all the right things, when you're going through and you're getting that information back from the client, like, hey, I just need to get in touch with my supervisor. Well, being quick to act means pick up the phone right now and figure out exactly what that means, right? So, so that's the third principle, always be quick to act. Fourth one is ask for help. And so the way that I mean by asking for help is that if you're stuck in a sales opportunity, you're not quite sure what to do. You've done the analysis, you've gone through the 6 questions, the what, the who, the why, the how, the when, and the where. And after doing all that, you've been honest with yourself, you talked to your accountability buddy, and you're still like, I can't figure out for the life of me why this deal is not moving forward. Then what I mean by ask for help, what I want you to do is just lean on your product champion. So if you've got somebody who's earnestly out there to help you with this sales opportunity, they've helped you set up meetings, they've coached you through how to run your meetings and who's going to be looking for what features and functionalities in your product, or they've helped you figure out how to navigate through procurement and vendor management, whatever that is, if you have a product champion there, then just pick up the phone and call the product champion and say, listen, I've got a couple of questions for you. As we've been working through this opportunity to work together over the last 3 months, as I go through my list of kind of my checklist of what would qualify for, completing the sales process, my list looks like we're pretty done, but it seems like we're not able to kind of get over the hump here. Can you just help me understand what we need to do, what needs to happen? Is there something on your side? Is it a budget thing? Is it a timing thing? Is it that we still are looking for someone to actually pay for this product and this rollout? You're not clear on how we would roll it out. Maybe the implementation plan I had suggested to you and thought that you were good with it, but maybe there's something in there that everybody in your team isn't comfortable with. Just can you help me understand where we are? And just be just have a really, really honest conversation. Use that time to be honest with the person and just be vulnerable and say, look, obviously I want to do everything I can. I feel like I have done everything I can to get this thing over the goal line, but we're kind of stuck here without you guys being customers. Just help me understand. If that person is really a product champion, then they will tell you, right? Or at least they'll tell you like, yeah, I'm sensing the same thing. Let me go talk to, so-and-so over in the technology department and see what the holdup is. Or, I'm not sure either. What if we had you come back and do another round of product demos? So even if that person doesn't have the answers, if they're a true product champion, a lot of times they will be in a situation where they'll try to help you support you to find the answers that you need to have, right? I remember doing a podcast interview with Melanie Wong. I've referenced her a couple of different times. And so she's a large account sales manager at Box.com. And one of the things that she does is just on a really like in terms of being honest and asking for help is she'll just say to somebody, look, after we've done a couple of preliminary customer discovery, qualification kinds of questions, like, hey, it seems like this is a good match, and we're going to kind of now march forward through a more prolonged sales process. She'll just flat out ask somebody, look, so just so we're both clear, this is going to be about a $200,000 investment. Do you have budget for that? And if you don't have budget for that, how can we go find the right people in your organization to go find that $200,000 budget? Right. So instead of kind of like hoping and praying that the next step is going to happen and then some way, somehow the budget's going to show up, it's a clear case of just one, being honest, two, being vulnerable, and three, most importantly, asking for help. Like, look, we checked all the early boxes. We get a lot more ahead of us, but I need to be really, really clear that you guys got budget set aside for this. And if you don't have budget set aside, then let's go make sure we can find who does have budget for this kind of implementation. So asking for help, just being vulnerable and asking that product champion or somebody else on the other side to help you navigate through the waters is a huge way that you can help to propel these pipeline opportunities that are sometimes stuck in neutral despite your best efforts. Try to get them to the late stage and then hopefully closed, right? So the fifth principle I want to talk about here is when you are doing your pipeline analysis and management, while of course we're looking at individual sales opportunities and we're trying to work on those individually, we also want to be looking for patterns. We want to be looking at patterns for where your deals are stumbling. So is there a certain stage in the sales process that's causing some big fallout or fall off? So as we've talked about before, there's kind of four major stages of the sale. There's needs analysis is the first. The second is evaluation of options. The third is resolution of concerns. And the fourth is implementation. So if you're finding, for example, that between the needs analysis and evaluation of options stage, that's typically where you're going to do your initial product demos. If you're finding that, getting a lot of interest, getting a lot of people that want to see our product, once they do the product demo though, things are kind of falling off. Like they're telling us, this looks pretty cool. Let us circle up and get back to you in a couple of weeks. If that seems to be the stall point or the stumbling block, you want to know that because maybe there's something you're not doing correctly earlier in the sales process. Maybe you're not qualifying your customers the right way and you're kind of pushing yourself into a demo with people that aren't quite ready to take action. So if they're not qualified in terms of budget or authority or need or timing, if they don't check all four of those boxes, but yet you're doing product demos, that can be a huge reason why at that stage of your sales process, things will fall off. So as you're doing your pipeline analysis, if you're seeing that happening, like, man, as soon as we do demos, that's the place where you'd think that things would really start to take off from a sales process standpoint because they finally get to see how awesome our product is and how it's going to solve their problems. But counter to that, you're actually not getting a lot of deals to go through the sales pipeline after the product demo. Well, you want to go figure out why that might be the case, right? Or later stage, maybe you're getting through the product demos and now you're having conversations with a few technical people on the other side or somebody on the risk or compliance side of the house, and you're trying to get those conversations going. And maybe you have a conversation or two, but you can't quite get those people to either meet with you when they're supposed to meet with you, or they're just making a lot of creating a lot of obstacles and roadblocks for you. Maybe it's not the early stage stuff, but it's a later stage. Maybe those are patterns that would indicate to you that there's something about your product or the way you're presenting your solution that doesn't meet the criteria and guidelines of some of these more technical people, whether it's on the risk management side of things or the data security side of things or information security. So whatever that is, and it could be different for every company, you want to start looking for patterns so that you can go repair how your overall process is working and get away from having these same stall points over and over. And then ultimately that way you can you don't have these big stall points into the future. So those are kind of the big five principles when it comes to your pipeline analysis and strategy. So I also said I wanted to leave you with something super tactical. And so I mentioned to you that there's actually two worksheets that you can use. So one of them is called Pipeline Analysis and Management. So the reason that I really love this worksheet is that it goes through and allows you to ask questions around those six areas of the Q framework, right? So it's what problem are you solving? Who are the buyer types? Have you talked to all of the buyer types? User buyer, technical buyer, economic buyer, product champion. So check, filling in this worksheet to know, am I clear on what problem I'm solving? And have I talked to each of the different buyer types? Then there's a place on the worksheet to identify exactly why that company would be buying from you. Is it to increase revenue or decrease cost or increase efficiency or decrease risk? What's the core reason? Where are they going to feel the positive ROI for this investment? There's an area on the worksheet for how. So what is the implementation plan? What does that look like? Is it a pilot program? Is it a paid trial? Is it a phased rollout that you're going to start with one team and then roll out to other teams down the road? Have you created that implementation plan? Have you had that discussion, right? There's a place on this worksheet that tells you to write in what is the next action. So a lot of places where deals can stall is we might be really clear on all these other aspects of the sales opportunity, but turns out we haven't definitively decided what the next action is going to be. And if that next action is, hey, customer said to call them in 2 weeks, that's bad. That's not the kind of next action that we want. We want to have a specific next action, which is customer and I have a meeting set for Thursday at 4:00 to discuss final implementation and rollout plan. Like that's a specific next action that you're going for. And also identifying when is that next action. So this is a way, again, the whole point of doing this pipeline analysis and giving you this tool, these principles and this worksheet is to help you be clear and be honest about where the gaps are, where the risk is for a specific sales opportunity. The final two boxes here on the spreadsheet or on this worksheet talk about who's in control of the next step. So are you in control of the next step? Meaning like, yes, you have a meeting set up with a specific person and a specific agenda to achieve a certain outcome, or is the customer in control of the next step? So maybe the customer said, hey, yeah, I'm going to circle up with the IT team and then get back to you to see after I talk with them and see what they say. That's a situation where you're not in control because one, you're not involved with that conversation with IT. And secondly, you don't have a specific time and day specified as to when your contact is going to be getting back to you, right? And then the last box here is price. Have you talked about price? If you've talked about price, what is the price? Now, price, as we've talked about many, many times, is not a conversation early in your sales process. You might have to give some pricing guidance. Price is something you want to be talking about later on. Ultimately, though, you do want to make sure, like, this could be a fall-off point for you. It's like, man, I'm doing all the right things and I'm getting the right people in the room and they're interested and they're excited about what we do. But then when I talk about the price, they're like, oh man, I didn't realize that your product was so expensive. Or, oh, I thought that you were, some kind of free software that we could just use and then you made money on advertising revenue somehow. Like, obviously that would be a really worst case scenario. But it can happen, right? And this is why I included that as part of this worksheet. So the idea of the pipeline analysis and management worksheet is that it allows you to objectively assess your sales pipeline to make sure you know exactly where each opportunity stands and ultimately identify places where you might have a gap or a risk in that sales opportunity. Now, the second worksheet that I prepared for you is just your pipeline strategy. So now that you've identified these specific sales opportunities that you need to be focusing on, where you've got a specific risk or a specific gap that you need to focus on, then use the pipeline strategy to then figure out what is your 1, 2, 3, what are the 3 steps that you're going to be taking in order to overcome that risk or fill in that gap. So it's kind of your to-do list. I mentioned way back earlier in this presentation that if you're doing your pipeline analysis the right way, as soon as you identify a few key opportunities where you have an open loop or an information gap or a risk to that sales opportunity, you should be creating that. That should be your task list. You want to be taking action right away. This pipeline strategy worksheet is designed to do exactly that. It's okay, got these 3 opportunities that I'm working on. These are really important. They're the ones that are most critical to move into the next stage or move across the goal line to become customers. I've identified the risks and gaps, and this is my 1, 2, 3 strategy that I'm going to take in order to fill that gap or overcome that risk. So So that's what I've got for you here in terms of the pipeline analysis and management presentation. Um, One of the things that I would definitely encourage you to do is, if at all, right, just start off with downloading the worksheet for yourself, or making a copy of the worksheet, and just take a couple of your the opportunities who you think are your top opportunities, the ones you think are the hottest or the best opportunities in your pipeline, and just go through those two or three, go through this worksheet and honestly ask yourself, like, man, am I clear on the problem? Am I clear on the buyers? Am I clear on the reason why they're buying? Am I clear on the implementation plan? Who's in control of the next step? Do we have a meeting set? What is that next step? If you go through that, I think hopefully you won't have too much and in the way of risks or gaps, and you'll be well on your way to getting those opportunities closed. Chances are there's probably at least one thing that you could be doing to improve your odds, to improve the information that you're making available to close that deal. So use that as if you don't do anything else right now, go take your top 3 sales opportunities, go through that pipeline analysis and management worksheet, and then take those actions right away. And I'm sure that you'll be thankful that you did. So that's thanks so much for listening and watching the presentation. Again, this is Scott Sambucci. If you have any other questions, obviously send me a note, hit me up on the Facebook group or anywhere else, and look forward to hearing how well your pipeline management and your pipeline analysis is going now that you know how to do it like a pro.